So, we're going to jump forward quite a number of years now, 3 decades more or less, and a perhaps rather surprising inclusion in terms of both the director and star, Scott, in Pirates.
Yes. Right then, Roman Polanski's Pirates. There is, of course, one thing that comes to mind when you hear the name Roman Polanski, and it's certainly not pirates. Unlawful sexual intercourse with a minor aside, and whether you want to put that to one side of the decision, I shall leave entirely to you. Is it worth that moral headache to view Pirates? No. There we go. But seeing as we're a film review podcast, I suppose we might as well review it. Set in 1659, we're introduced to Walter Matthau, of all people, his notorious pirate Captain Red, with his loyal sidekick Chris Campion's John Baptiste, or Frog, as he's known, adrift on a raft and contemplating cannibalism. But before that line is crossed, they are rescued by a homeward-bound Spanish treasure galleon, the Neptune, and they're both immediately thrown in the brig. There, Red starts to plot to force a mutiny on the Neptune and claim their prized treasure, an Aztec throne of gold, for himself. On the other side of the ship are Damien Thomas's Don Alfonso, taking over as captain after the death of the original one, who's trying to seduce a passenger, Charlotte Lewis Maria Dolores, the niece of Maracaibo's governor, who Frog has also taken quite a shine to. And, well, so it goes with mutinies and counter-mutinies and ransoming and a single-minded pursuit of that shiny furniture that will ultimately lead to Red's undoing. Now, if we're being positive, it might be nice to see pirates being, well, unscrupulous brigands and not the more Robin Hood-esque freedom fighters that they're often massaged into in films looking for more sympathy for them. But being that this is nominally a comedy, it's a bit of a strange situation to make Red the butt of the joke when he's also being quite so unpleasant. And it's also a shame that the jokes aren't actually funny in any way, given the, especially the ill-advised slapstick routines that are just embarrassing. You know, poop deck is not literal.
Yes, why were the people all over the deck, Scott? I couldn't understand that. It's like, that doesn't happen. Why is that there?
Yes, I have no clue. Walter Matthau gives it his all, to be fair, with some enthusiastic delivery of lines that really don't deserve a lot of enthusiasm. It's not all bad. For example, the production design is entirely impeccable, from the costuming to the full-sized replica galleon built for the film at tremendous cost, which does look absolutely fantastic. However, that aside, I don't think I've got a great deal positive to say about this film. It's aiming at a younger crowd, I suppose, but it seems that the way they interpreted that aim is to make all of the jokes a bit too silly for a film that's threatening to rape characters this often. Yeah, a bit of a clash of styles and a bit of a mess, and I did not get a great deal of enjoyment out of Roman Polanski's Pirates at all. Drew, any better? Quite a disappointment for me, I would say. Don't bother.
Yes, unfortunately, my experience was similar to yours, perhaps even worse.
Yeah.
It's particularly disappointing too, given that we did have another film shortlisted for this episode, which I watched before Scott, and
vetoed.
Yes, that's a good word. Vetoed because it was appalling, and, you know, when it'd already gone for its 7th rape joke by the 20th minute, none of which obviously were funny, I was like, I don't want to talk about this film. I'll have to talk about that stuff. And here I am, having watched the next film and having to talk about that stuff, and I'm not happy.
Yes.
I had never heard of this film, and I watched the film having looked up nothing about it at all, other than I knew it was Roman Polanski, and that was it. And I'm quite capable of separating the art from the artist, particularly when it's the director. When it's someone on screen, I think that's a bit more difficult. But I'm okay. I may have talked about Roman Polanski films on this podcast for at least one, which is Chinatown. So I had no particular issue with that. But coming into it, I knew nothing about the film. I thought, Roman Polanski doing a pirate film? Okay, I'll give it a go. I had no idea what it was meant to be. And, you know, despite the human feces for some reason in the middle of the deck, I still wasn't even convinced at that point that they were trying to be a comedy. That's largely because none of it's funny. It took me a while to actually decide that was definitely, because even Walter Matthau's presence doesn't necessarily mean it's a comedy. You might lean that way, but if he is in straight stuff like The Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3, for instance. But it goes on, it's like, oh, this is trying to be funny. It isn't. And again, we have the problem of the pirates. When you have something like the Pirates of the Caribbean films, which we aren't covering in this episode, they were a bit too obvious, we thought. But at least I assume that's what you thought. I'm really guessing your thoughts, Scott. But although the first one does have the Royal Navy in it, it's not. They're not really villainous pirates, especially not Jack Sparrow. And if there's enemies, it's either sea creatures or other pirates, and it's so you kind of can separate yourself from that completely, and because it's also a comedy and things, it's not to be taken seriously. Whereas the pirates here are your nasty pirates, as Scott mentioned, threatening to rape people at multiple points during the film, and somehow they're supposed to be the heroes.
Yeah.
It's not enjoyable, especially when the person threatening the rape or trying to force someone else to threaten rape is Walter Matthau, your main character. It's not fun. It's not enjoyable. It's also painfully unfunny for most of it. And the strange thing is, too, like, the whole film seems to be set up that we're supposed to be rooting for the pirates, that the pirates are the heroes, but no, they're the only ones doing these villainous things. And we're supposed to somehow think that the Spanish are the villains. And historical context tells us that they probably didn't ask for that big Aztec throne. You know, they were doing some nice things there. In the world of this film in particular, though, it's nothing. The Spaniards are fine. Apart from, well, not being Spanish, they're all English. And the Dutchman's English. And Walter Matthau's played an Englishman. And only Chris Campion as Jean-Baptiste or Frog is actually French. And it's all very confusing because you have to be told that the Dutchman's a Dutchman because he's English, because he's played by Roy Kinnear. Right. Right. But yeah, the Spanishness are fine. They're loyally serving the Spanish crown. They talk about it a few times. None of them's villainous. They all follow orders. They don't double cross anyone. They don't stab anyone. You see them meting out punishment and stuff, but it's kind of how that thing went at the time. So I'm not in the context, not that bothered by that. But no, it's the pirates that we're supposed to root for. And no, so it's very hard to get invested in a film where, like, from the beginning, none of them are likable, especially not Captain Red.
Yeah.
And it's a real waste of Walter Matthau, who I like a great deal. Why they crippled him with this... Well, to be honest, I've heard worse English accents, but not brilliant, not particularly consistent English accent. And yeah, it's a weird film. I don't understand why this exists. And also I resent it existing because I skipped Yellowbeard. Well, I watched all of Yellowbeard, but skipped it from this podcast and ended up with this stuff in it anyway, and I'm not happy. Also, don't watch Yellowbeard. It's appalling.
Yeah. That's a twofer, then, of films to avoid.
Yes.
Yeah.
I watched the damn thing. I may as well get some value out of it. Just at least warn other people off in case they're like we were, Scott, thinking, well, it's Graham Chapman and other Monty Python people in a pirate film. That might be fun.
How bad could it be? Oh, yes.
Oh, right, yes. Well, that answered that question definitively. This was not so good.